first of all, thank you, Mike. I'm too loud, I guess. I pull it right to me. I just wanted to thank you. That was a great presentation. All of the presentations were great. And just give them a little hand. So now what I'd like to do is we had some new people join us, some panelists, and I'd like them to each introduce themselves. We'll just go right down the line, because I want you to know what questions you might ask them and something about their background and their involvement in the presentations. So Nathan?
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, I'm Nathan. I'm co-founder of CEO of Tulip, and I'm excited to be here and really passionate about augmenting the humans on shop floor, as Jane mentioned, and a few others here as well. So.
I'm Ed Moore. I'm with Chevron. I'm an operational technology strategist for Chevron Global. And this is an area where we're trying to figure out what is our future factory. We have factories that are 100 years old, our facilities, or older. And so there's a lot of opportunity we see as we move into the kind of the normally unattended facilities.
Brad? I think did I miss somebody? Yeah, Brad.
Steve.
Steve.
I'm
Sorry.
Steve Beamer. I work for Element. I have 37 years in industry, in the oil and gas industry. I led the first leg of a successful digital transformation in BP, and one of the big helpers was this company Element. So when I retired, I decided to come and help them expand their business and spread the word and the gospel of this can be done, and you can get there. So that's me.
Okay, well, now I'd like to start with the questions, and I'd like you to get the mic when you use the question. It looks like Brian has a question, Brian Pearlstein. So, and if you can say your name and company too, that would be nice.
Sure. Brian Pearlstein, excuse me, Owens Corning. And my question actually is around thinking about, Jane, I think you mentioned something about building the citizen developers, employees build apps, improve performance. Well, we have that today, right? And they build them, they have them on their laptop, they don't maintain them, they don't sustain them. How do you see that as moving forward into that model of allowing people to develop their tools, but also having a way to sustain and maintain them and prevent sprawl of siloed outcomes?
So that's a really good question, and I get that often, and often have these very long conversations about how we're doing that. So there's a couple different classes. There's the Power BI citizen developers, and then there's everything we do on my team with Tulip and some other application citizen developers. And we've taken the approach, as we do an OT, that we're going to make sure that we're secure and that we're safe and that we're considering PPI. So we actually govern and monitor the applications that are being made. If a site builds an application that we think needs to be in our standard library, then it becomes governed. And then we have a periodic review of all the one-of kind of things and try and maybe help them make it better, or just to make sure we're not having a privacy issue, like people storing birthdays or whatever information in their Tulip cloud, and doing that. So it's a long process to make that happen, but we actually are working with Tulip to build in the controls so we can do that. And whenever we ask our OT security specialist, well, what about Power BI? He's like, yeah, well, And so we have another mess there with Power BI that we're trying to get our arms around so that we can have functioning dashboards at the top layer, and that people can actually access and use without breaking them.
Does anyone want to add to that question?
Yeah, I'd love to add real quick, because we provide platforms to build app libraries and everything that Jane mentioned, but I have a different perspective for you. I think that your people, if they don't have first-class tools, they will use sticks and stones and spreadsheets and PowerPoints because they will solve their problem. And the reason is not because the love of technology or the desire to digitally transform. That exists, some express more depending on your workforce. But the reality is that they really have the context of the work they're trying to improve. And they're, in many organizations, are indoctrinated in lean and really truly want to practice that. And if you don't give them tools, like the rest of the IT, internet-based type folks, then they're just going to do it themselves. And I come from software engineering, embedded engineering type of background, and I know that engineers are engineers are engineers. They actually care about their stuff. The issue is that the people on the shop floor are not software engineers, and it's time that we gave them tools like software engineers. And then I'm not arguing that they will go all the way to self-govern, but we set rules of the road to how to use GitHub and Atlassian, this, that, whatever product, and guess what? People use it, they make it better, and they do it because they control the first-class tools. And yes, IT has auspice above. So to think that that type of internet dynamics is going to look at the world of operation and say like, well, let's skip over it, to me is not real. It's just like we're missing tools. And I think Tulip is one tool like that. There are many other that adhere to similar traits, and it's going to happen.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
I really like what you're saying and agree with you. But our experience so far has been, maybe it's because we don't have the right tools, but people, for whatever reason, are struggling to build things for themselves. Do you think that's a tools issue?
I think they, to a degree, it's a tools issue and falls in the general. And my big thing of recent, I'm trying to have full conversation with zero buzzwords. So I'm going to use the first one here. I apologize, but it falls into the category of upskilling. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have people who, on one hand, drive like a supercomputer called a smartphone in their pocket, can do very sophisticated things that are just have been meticulously designed consumer level experiences that we're never going to give up, whether it's your bank or whatever, right? Like depositing a check. It sounds simple, but actually pretty complex software goes on the background. But if you want that check deposit to be the way you transact with your machine, and you want to do it on the cycles forget what tool it is. I'm talking about, does it solve the problem, cost curves, time to actually matter for your operation? There we're certainly missing tools. I think we're bringing new tools. There are more folks in the market doing that as well. And I've seen people upskill themselves through, shockingly, online platforms like university and other things. And we should embrace that, and organizations should embrace that, and change will happen. There's nothing you can do to stop that.
Okay, do you have another question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Mike mentioned something around 39 plants, right? So my question is, probably in the beginning, different level of maturities. So how do you select the correct approach? Like a big bang, or you started by the one with low maturity or the one with highest maturity? And my second question is the benefits, the benefit realization, the metrics. How do you select the correct moment to start measuring? And nowadays, all these 39 plants has the same level of maturity, or are you still probably not? How do you are showing the results in these different plants?
That's a really, really good question. So with this digital plant maturity model, we actually went out and scored everybody. We've done it a few times, so you can see over time how they're changing. And the plants are broken into 3 categories, just from a business perspective. Innovative, like a stalwart size plant, and then maybe emerging markets type plants. And the amount of investment is allocated accordingly. So that's a top level strategy, which I guess luckily for us is somewhat dictated to us. Like, this is the first 11 you focus on because that's where we're making most of the products and distributing them from around the world. And then it kind of tails off. And then each one of those categories necessitates a different strategic focus. So the 11 innovative, there might be 40 shop floor things that can make a difference. But for the emerging markets, there's probably 5. And that's how we've been looking at it. And over time, this is a terrible economic buzzword, but trickle-down economics. If we spend the money at the innovative plants, for example, that digital operations center, that was deployed everywhere. A lot of it was self-deployed because it was designed to be intuitive, and that's why we took 2-year plans down to 2 weeks, because they could deploy it on their own. So I think it's a combination of things, and then with the metrics and measuring things, it's always an ongoing debate, let's say. And I'll put it to you this way: before we start projects, I'm not a big believer in the ROI calculations and all that, because we can estimate numbers that look like whatever anybody wants to see. Usually when I do a business case, I've been doing this for 20-something years, the first savings calculation is $50 trillion, and I'm like, oh, wow, I better dumb that down. That's a lot of efficiency. So, meanwhile, I probably had the decimal point in the wrong place, but when you do those kinds of efficiency plays, there's no real money in that. That's all cost avoidance, and it's theoretical. I always say that we create the opportunity in the future for a plant leader to have different levers to save actual money. Because the way we set budgets for plants is every year the budget is cut, and then you have to justify everything to increase it from there. So we provide the opportunity to create efficiencies that they can decide how they want to allocate. It's a much smoother business case process from a IT digital perspective. But that requires people just believing in what you're doing, which we did here yesterday, the Pure Cycle COO. When you have a top-level, C-level executive go, I believe in this, the investment comes a lot easier.
Mr. Jane, you're one of the few people that's done it as long and twice, right? So teach us. What works, what doesn't work?
Well, that's a really broad question.
But you have the experience.
So
You've done it twice.
is there a specific thing that you'd like for
Yeah,
me to elaborate on?
because you done it at Covestro, right?
Yeah.
And that was different.
Yes.
And now you're at Stanley Black & Decker, and what really worked that was similar at both places, and then what did you learn that was kind of different that we could apply, that maybe you applied that helped you get started at Stanley, right? Because that's what most of us have problems with, is how do you go identify something that says, hey, I see that I'll go get started, that works.
Right. So again, it's about, so my first week I was terrified. I'm like, oh my God, I've spent over 30 years in chemicals. Now I'm making tools, and I don't even use tools, so I wasn't sure what I was doing. So I drove to the closest facilities in Dallas-Fort Worth, and I toured their facilities, and spoke with the plant manager and some of the operators about, what are you doing here and why? And I saw some really old equipment in the Dallas plant, some big furnaces with a guy standing in front of it, doing this kind of thing. And I'm just like, oh my God, what did I get into? And then the Fort Worth plant, there's our new Craftsman plant, and it's fully automated and everything is robotic, right? So it's like really cool. And then the difference between, but when you look at the Dallas plant and the Fort Worth plant, and then the comparison to chemicals, it's all people have the same problem, which is, what decision can I make to make this go faster, to be better, to not have off-spec product, to whatever, right? To make sure you're safe and secure and things like that, and really, going and talking to people and finding out their pain points is across all verticals. And in Dallas, when I was in there, and they were saying, "Oh, we've deployed this new fancy software," and I see, computer screens hanging from the wall by the power cord. I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think you're using it." Oh, well, no, not really. And so we've actually replaced whatever they were doing there, and someone had built their own OEE system with Tulip, and now you go back and people are happy. And they're not just ignoring the computer systems and things like that, but we're actually approaching it from the bottom up. But there's a lot of parallels, one of them being data. So I always had access to data until I went to Stanley. And having the data accessibility is very important, and being able to connect all those systems is very important. I think that no matter what industry you're in, it should be there.
Okay, do we have another question? In between, I'd actually like to ask a quick question of Ed. And he's in charge of Chevron's Innovation Center, and I'd just like him to talk a little bit about, because I was really impressed with this, the range of technologies that they're implementing, and a little bit about how you would measure success for those technologies.
Yeah, so that depends on the technology. So we can talk about, so one of the technologies we rolled out several years ago was like the HoloLens, and we measured that strictly on cost savings on travel. So very simple, very easy to capture, and it paid for itself very quickly. But those are examples of technology that are still immature, still early stage. They work for very specific use cases and do it very well, but they're still going to be improving quite a bit over the coming years. So building up that business case, we've also kind of talking back to the discussion on how do we choose the plants, how do we roll that out, is we found plants that were like open to this level of innovation. We have those type of champions. And getting those people locally that are enthusiastic about the technology, they will be your champions. And so that was super helpful for us to get that successful in one facility, and then we've rolled that out across all our global facilities. It's also a technology that was able to go across all our different types of processes. So we have operations that are on the bottom of the seafloor under a mile of water, right? That environment's worse than the surface of the moon. Okay, that's fully autonomous. We can't put people down there if we wanted to even. All the way to our operations in some of the more climate less friendly environments in Kazakhstan and South Australia. As you look at some of the newer technologies, we're now starting to look at things like robotics because we want to go to what we call normally unattended facilities to achieve that kind of North Star goal for our operations and to move to autonomous operations. We're looking at robotics like the Boston Dynamics Spot. So how can we use that? We're very early on that, again, finding some of our key business units that are willing to pilot that and come up with very specific capabilities that we're targeting. So everything from like daily construction progress using LiDAR scanning to where it can just go out and scan and update your digital twin, all the way to now we're trying to figure out how we use the robotic arm, how do we turn valves, how can we basically put a person in the field when they're not in the field, because some of our fields might be 2.5 hour drive. So how do we put these type of autonomous vehicles in the field? So.
Thank you. Now, we did have some other questions. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Varsha Raju from Microsoft, part of the Autonomous Systems Group there, which is real-time AI control. I was really interested, and this is a question for the whole panel, I was really interested in hearing more about how you think about incorporating the knowledge, the strategies, the experience of your operators and your technicians into your digital transformation agenda. Especially, I think, Mike, you talked about heading towards level 4 automation. As you move up that produce scale and you get to more and more autonomous systems, how are you engaging those SMEs in that journey? What is their role? I can understand in the context of Tulip, you've got a no-code, low-code platform. That makes sense. You're involving those SMEs from the outset. But for the rest of you, how are you thinking about the utilization of that expertise, incorporation of that expertise in your automation?
You want to go?
I'll go first. If this is okay, we're on. So thanks for that. It's a great point, and as we've heard throughout the sessions, we do have a bit of a brain drain going on with people retiring. The tacit knowledge that's in people's heads is walking out the door. The locked up knowledge that's in paper documents is sitting on a shelf somewhere, whether they're SOPs or past things that you've run. So, I sat in a great presentation yesterday in one of the, I think it was this room in this track, looking at Georgia Pacific's system for knowledge capture, which is pretty fascinating. I learned a lot in that session, and that's something I'm actually going to take back. But one of the things we're doing in the short term is trying to capture people's expertise, per se, through the combination of video and augmented reality annotations to then project in front of them in space so that they can do a complex task and it's really training on the jobs or video-based SOPs. And it's been very effective so far in helping people get up to speed on a complex task quickly. So that's one thing that we're doing, but I'm sure there's others.
Yeah, anybody else want to add to that?
I was just going to say we're doing the same thing at Stanley Black & Decker. It's very effective.
Yeah, I just want to add one quick comment. First of all, I think that in the long run, this is just a little bit of a technological prediction here, the best AI computer you're going to have on the shop floor is a human, by far. That's not going to change ever. The best perception, the best articulated grips, you can teach it just by telling it something. But the problem is variability. And if there's no, and the thing that makes humans more regular and engaged is interfaces. And like if you look at the full name of Tulip, it's Tulip Interfaces. And there's a reason for that. And just to combine 2 points, because there was like a discussion here with the gentleman about KPIs and ROI and like the value of bottom up and what does it do with AI. So 3 points. If you do bottom up, you actually get highly contextualized data of every operation, every work cell, every like what happened, what was the vector of sensor data, all that kind of stuff. And if you count that and match it to simple stuff like cost of goods sold, labor hours, things like that, then the ROI becomes math. And if you ship that to the machine learning as a service from vendor XYZ, then you can do a lot of learning. So it's only as good as the data and as good as your model, like to get the ROI and the AI coming together. So that's the reason to invest in augmenting humans. And yes, there's like AR and this and that, but at the end of the day, if you don't have something that lets them bring themselves into the process, you're not going to get the granularity of the models to drive that.
Yeah, I will add. Hello. We've had success solving problems in the plant, and I'm actually thinking about one plant, not the sea of plants like some of us, but we've had success. So if you take digital out of the equation, forget about these tools. If you can empower these teams of operators, mechanics, team leaders, whatever, to solve their own problems, that works really well. And I think if we can learn how to do that and then also can teach them how to think digitally, then we can support them with the, we can make them better, essentially. But it doesn't start with these digital solutions, these automatic solutions, I don't think. And that's how I'm working on operational excellence today, and this is exactly how we deploy OEE improvements to the plant. We literally start with setting a target and then get them thinking in a continuous loop on how to improve their work. And I think if we do that well, then we can start to bring in, maybe Tulip needs to be in our plant, I don't know. So they can develop then solutions that help them get even better than where we start. But fundamentally, it starts with empowering the people to solve problems for themselves.
Okay, well,
Yeah, I'll just add that I agree with everything everybody said, and you have to really do the hard thing, right? You have to take your most experienced operators, those people, the brain drain that's coming out, and you have to engage them in the development of the tools so that you can make every operator as good as that best operator, or every mechanic as good as the best one. So you have to really make the sacrifice of taking that guy off of his job or that lady off of her job and going in and developing the tool.
I'm just going to add one thing there. It's great for us to try to digitize our existing workflows, which I think is what a lot of us are talking about. We really have to rethink from the ground up. If we're going to go to full autonomy, you consider what you're doing today, but you've got to back up and look at what are you trying to do and how do you make that fully autonomous. Right. So it's we're not there yet, but if you're not considering that or thinking along that way, if you're just digitizing your existing workflows, you're really not thinking long term.
oh, Okay, well, we're just about out of time, and I know there's other questions, and hopefully the panelists and speakers will stay for a few minutes, because there's a break right now, and answer some of the questions that maybe people still have. And what I'd like to do just before we break is I'd just like to go down and have each person on the panel and the speakers just tell us one key takeaway from this session, something that they'd like you to take away. Mike, can we start with you?
Certainly. I think the key thing to take away is it's just hard work. There's no easy button. You've got to brute force some of this and drive it with strategy and do the hard work.
Yeah, my key takeaway is that focus on humans' work, and it has already started. So this is not something that is going to come in a few years, and we're just waiting for it. And it's important to not be afraid of it as you're transitioning.
I would say think 10 years into the future, what do you want your operations to look like, and then start working backwards. If you don't think far enough, you'll implement a solution that's out of date by the time you get it implemented.
Yeah, my first takeaway is you just got me to think differently than I was 5 minutes ago, so good job. My second takeaway is it's really amazing. There's a lot to learn from each other, and I'd like to see what it takes to get into collaborative projects. I think you threw one out, sit down and work on metrics maybe. There's plenty more where that came from, I think, and if anybody's open to discussing how to do that, let me know.
Jane?
So for me, I'd just like to say start small, so it's not so overwhelming. So we've got 120 plus plants, and there's no way we could eat that herd of elephants in one sitting. So find a pain point from someone who's engaged and solve their problem, and then see how you scale it. And just take the one success at a time and be happy for it. And it's not magic, but when you look back, it'll seem like it.
Steve?
Yeah, I would say take away a philosophy of think big and think about, I want this to go to the whole organization, but start small, like Jane just said, right? Go after one problem that's common to everybody that you're going to get value from, so that and then go fast, right? So solve that problem for one team and then scale it out as fast as you can to the rest of the organization. And as you solve it, you have to be thinking about, am I doing this to a corporate standard? Am I building it in a way that everybody else will use it? And it's not just that one thing for that team. So, start small, think big, go fast.
So with that, I'd like to just show a hand of applause for all the people that spoke today, and to thank them, and also to thank their companies, because they put a lot of time into this. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming, too.